Hello friend, and welcome back to Spoken Sleep. My name's Chuku. Tonight, we're going back to the Unlisted Hotel, Heron House. If you've been here before, you'll know it. And if you haven't, here's all you need. It's a small hotel you'll never find twice, run by a man who's already expecting you. And the door of your room doesn't always open onto the corridor you came in through. Tonight, someone takes a room there for one night, on their way home from something lovely. And in the small hours, they wake to the sound of rain that has no business falling on a quiet country road, and a light at the end of the curtains that wasn't there when they closed their eyes. Thank you for being here tonight. Out of everything you could be listening to, you chose this, and that means more than you know. If you enjoy these, a quiet subscribe helps more than you think. It means I'll see you again next week. Now get comfortable. Turn the lights down low. Let your body sink a little further into your bed. And let the day be over now. Nothing is required of you here. Your body already knows what to do. You had a friend you were very bad at seeing. Not on purpose. You loved them. You'd have said, without hesitating, that they were one of the most important people in your life, and you'd have meant it. You just also happened to live your life in a way that made actually seeing them nearly impossible. The weeks filling themselves up, the good intentions sliding quietly from this month to the next month, to some vague and sunlit soon that never came. You'd last seen them at someone's wedding. Before that, you genuinely couldn't say. You'd exchanged birthday messages, and the occasional photo or something one of you thought the other would find funny. And roughly twice a year, one of you would send the message that said, "We have to sort out a proper catch-up." A message you both understood to be entirely ceremonial, like a national anthem, and about as likely to result in anyone actually doing anything. And then, this once, somehow, it had happened. You'd gone. And it had been one of the best few days you'd had in years. You brace yourself a little on the way there, worried it will be awkward, that you'll have grown apart, that you'll spend the first evening doing the exhausting work of reintroducing yourselves. And then they open the door, and none of that happens. None of it. Because it turns out no time has passed at all. It never does with them. You pick up mid-sentence from a conversation you last touched 2 years ago, and neither of you can remember starting. You are, instantly, entirely yourself. The self you apparently keep in a drawer somewhere, and only take out around certain people. You talked until 3 in the morning about nothing. You'd eaten far too much. You'd laughed the specific way you only laugh with someone who knew you before you were whoever you are now. And you'd slept in their spare room, better than you'd slept in months. And now, unfortunately, you were going home. They lived out in the middle of nowhere, in the best possible way. Up where the country stops apologizing and just gets on with being beautiful. Hills, stone walls, a silence at night so total it had actually kept you awake the first evening. Your city-ruined ears straining for a siren, a hum, anything. By the third night, you'd have moved there. You'd taken the little 2-carriage train to the nearest real station to change for the long line home, and you were standing on the platform, bag between your feet, still pleasantly wrung out from 3 days of laughing, when the announcement came.
This is a customer service announcement. The 6:45 p.m. train to Waterloo has been cancelled. We apologize for any inconvenience.
The rain, they said. It had been coming down all afternoon. Proper rain. Settled in rain. The kind with no intention of stopping and nothing to prove. Something about the line further south. Nothing until the morning. And you stood there, and you waited to feel it. The lurch that everyone does. How do I fix this? The tomorrow, the work, the emails already stacking themselves up somewhere out of sight, like they'd been waiting for their moment. It didn't come. You checked again, just in case, inwardly, the way you'd prod a tooth that was supposed to hurt. Nothing. No lurch. Just, and this took you a second to identify. It had been so long. Relief. Because honestly, good. You hadn't wanted to go home yet. You felt it curdling in you all afternoon. That low Sunday evening dread. The good thing ending. The ordinary week reaching out to reel you back in. And now a train you had nothing to do with. Cancelled by a sky you had no say over. Had reached down and handed you one more night. One more night out here. In this soft green quiet you'd fallen a little in love with. It felt less like an inconvenience than a gift you hadn't known to ask for. You picked up your bag. You'd need somewhere to stay. Well, you thought, why not? You ducked under the awning, out of the rain, and got out your phone and searched for somewhere nearby. Nothing. Which, fair enough. You were, after all, in the middle of a gloriously nowhere. You widened the map, searched again. The little wheel turned, and it thought about it, and turned, in a way that always makes you feel personally judged by the internet. And then, after a pause, it went on a touch longer than felt entirely normal. As if something somewhere had taken a moment to look over you and decided you do. A single result appeared. Heron House. 1. Just the one. Sitting there on the map, a short way off, in a spot you'd have sworn, just a second ago, had been nothing but blank green. You tapped it, frowning. There was almost nothing to tap. No photos, no website, no cheerful little price. Just the name and the pin. And right at the bottom, the only thing anyone had ever bothered to add, a single review. A 5 out of 5 star rating. The review said, in full, "Not sure what just happened. 5 stars. Huh. You looked at that for a while, there in the rain. By every sensible measure, it should have been a red flag. One review, no information. A testimonial that read like it had been left by someone still mildly concussed. Any reasonable person would have kept scrolling. But you laughed, out loud, once, quietly, on an empty platform. And you found that instead of putting you off, it had done something closer to the opposite. It was, you thought, the single most intriguing thing you'd read in months. All right, you thought. Yes. That one. Obviously that one. And you put your phone away, and you pulled your collar up, and you stepped out into the rain to go and find it. Heron House was not far, which was lucky, because you were not really dressed for a hike. The map put it a little way up the road that climbed just out of town, back toward the hills, and you decided to walk it. It was close enough. And there's a certain mood. You were in it now. Where walking through rain, you have no obligation to hurry. It stops being a hardship and becomes something almost luxurious. You had nowhere to be. It was, in its way, the whole point. The town gave out around you as you climbed. The streetlights thinned and then gave up entirely. And the dark got darker, and the rain got louder, and the road narrowed to something that clearly didn't expect much company. And then, there it was, set back from the road behind a low wall, and a scrap of dark garden. It didn't look like a hotel. It looked more like a house. A tall, narrow, slightly stern old house. The kind that had been standing there long enough to have watched several centuries happen and formed no strong opinion about any of them. Warm light in one or two of the windows. A cozy lamp over the door. And a small brass plate beside it, worn so smooth, you had to lean in through the rain to read it. Heron House. You pushed the door. It opened. You stepped in, out of the rain. Inside, it was warm and low-ceilinged and quiet. And it stopped you for a second on the mat, because it really didn't feel like walking into a hotel lobby at all. It felt like walking into somebody's front room. A rug that had clearly been walked across by a great many feet, over a great many years. A clock ticking to itself somewhere you couldn't see. The particular hush of a place that had been someone's home for longer than it had been anything else, and hadn't entirely agreed to change. There was a small desk. Behind it sat a man of no age you could put a number to, with a pair of reading glasses shoved up onto his forehead, and the mild, unbothered expression of a man who had known you were coming and couldn't think why you'd expect otherwise. One night, he said. You hadn't said anything yet. You hadn't got so much as a syllable out. Please, you said. My train was cancelled. They are sometimes, he said. Not sorry to hear it. Not, oh dear. Just a mild confirmation that yes, trains do that. As though you'd remarked on the weather or gravity. And he reached below the desk without looking and produced a key. A real one, brass, worn soft, on a little wooden fob with the number 4 pressed into it. He set it on the desk between you and him, with the air of a man completing a transaction that had, as far as he was concerned, been settled some time ago. Breakfast isn't included, he said, already looking back down at whatever he'd been reading. But the kettle works. You waited. You know, in case there was a second half to that. Directions, Wi-Fi, the ordinary machinery of checking into somewhere. There wasn't. That was the whole of it. That was, apparently, everything you needed to know. Room 4 was at the end of a narrow corridor, on the second floor, and its door opened with the easy, unremarkable give of a door that had been opened many thousands of times. The room was small and plain, and just about perfect. A bed heaped with blankets and soft creams and greys. A bed that, you could tell just by looking, took its responsibility seriously. A lamp on the bedside table, laying down a low amber warmth over everything. A single chair, a small window on the far wall, curtains already drawn against the night. After 3 days of good company, and a long day of trains, and a longer walk through the rain, it was, hands down, the most inviting room you had ever seen in your life. You dropped your bag. You peeled off your wet shoes and left them slumped by the door. You did the strict minimum a person does before falling into a bed. No more. because you were suddenly, enormously tired. The good kind of tired. The kind that arrives all at once the moment you stop moving. You didn't bother opening the curtains. Why would you? It was a rainy road in the dark, and you'd seen a rainy road in the dark, and the bed was right there, and had been patiently making its case this whole time. You turned off the lamp. You got in. The bed was even better than advertised. You were asleep before you finished deciding to be. Some hours later, you woke up. Not dramatically. Nobody was chasing you through the dream. There was no jolt, no lurch, no bolt upright in the dark. You just surfaced, the way you sometimes do in the small dead, middle of the night. Drawn up out of a deep sleep, to the top of things for no reason your body is willing to explain. One moment gone, the next moment present, blinking at a dark ceiling, entirely and unhelpfully awake. You waited to go back down. You didn't go back down. You tried the usual things, in the usual order. You turned over. You turned over the other way. You did the slow breathing you read about once, that you're pretty sure works if you actually commit to it, which you never do. You tried thinking about nothing, that old trick, which as always, summoned, instantly and with great enthusiasm, everything, every loose end, every unanswered email, waiting for you back in the world. That thing you said in 2019. And after a while of losing that particular fight, you gave up and did the modern thing. You reached for your phone and you put on a podcast. One of those slow, hushed, deliberately dull ones that exist exactly for this purpose, that are engineered to bore you gently back to sleep. You didn't even choose it, really. You just opened up YouTube and clicked on a profile called Spoken Sleep. There was a story about spoons. You didn't even choose it, really. You just tapped the first thing that looked sufficiently boring to do the job.
And so, to truly appreciate the spoon, we must first go back, all the way back, to the Neolithic. Because the earliest spoons, of course, were not metal at all. They were carved patiently, with great care, from wood, and from bone, and from the humble shell. Indeed, the very word spoon comes down to us from an old word meaning simply a chip of wood. Imagine that. Every spoon you have ever held, a distant echo of a single splinter, lifted from beside the fire by some clever, hungry soul, many thousands of years ago.
Perfect, you thought. This was perfect. Genuinely, ideally, boring. The history of spoons. narrated by a man who sounded like a warm bath. You'd be unconscious inside a minute. You were not unconscious inside a minute. Somewhere around the humble shell, something went quietly, catastrophically wrong. You got interested. You realized, with a sort of dawning horror, that you were listening, actually following it, lying wide awake in the dark at some unknowable hour, genuinely wanting to know what happened next in the history of the spoon. It had backfired completely. The one thing that was supposed to switch off your brain had actually switched it on. You laughed at yourself quietly, in the dark, and you turned the good gentle spoon man off, mid-splinter, and admitted defeat. You were awake, fully, undeniably, no getting around it, awake. Fine, so be it. You'd just start the day, whatever time the day currently was. You sat up, and it was sitting up in the dark that you first noticed the rain. Because it was wrong. Not frightening wrong, just too much. You'd fallen asleep to a soft patter on a roof. Ordinary rain on an ordinary town. But this was something else entirely. This rain was coming down in earnest, hard and full and close, hammering on the roof just over your head, sheeting down the black glass of the window. A great steady roar of the water that seemed to have the whole enormous night folded up inside of it. And running underneath it, this was the part that made you go still. A wind. A long, high, open, endless wind, sweeping in from somewhere, with a great deal of room to sweep, curling around the building, leaning on it, moving on. That was not the sound of a quiet road on the edge of a small town in the hills. That was the sound of somewhere very big and very high and very long away from where you had gone to sleep. You sat in the dark and listened to it. The wind, the rain, the specks of distant thunder. And then you noticed the light. There was light at the edges of the curtains, only a little, a thin pale stream of it, running down each side of the window, where a few hours ago there had been nothing but dark. The curtains were the same curtains. The window was the same window. But something out beyond them had changed while you slept. Some light out there in the night that had no business existing on a dead quiet country road. And it lay along the curtain's edges in a cold, steady, patient line. You should probably have felt a flicker of something then. Unease, perhaps. The small animal alarm of "this is not where I fell asleep." You didn't. You sat there in the warm bed and felt instead that oldest and simplest of pools. The curtain not yet drawn back, the parcel not yet opened, the morning not yet looked at. Something was out there. Something was waiting to be seen. And you had the distinct and unarguable feeling. You couldn't have said how you knew it, only that you did completely. That it was waiting for you. That whatever lay beyond that glass had settled itself into place in the dark and lit its own light, and was now simply patiently waiting for you to get up and come and look. So, you did. You pushed back the blankets. The air met your skin, cool. The floor was cool underfoot. You crossed the small dark room. You took the edge of the curtain between your finger and thumb, and you drew it back. There was no road. There was a mountain. You stood at the glass and forgot, briefly, how breathing worked, because beyond the window, there was no town, no road, no half-familiar hills. There was a mountain, an enormous one, a vast dark shoulder of the earth, rising and falling away into the streaming night. And rain. Rain absolutely everywhere. Pouring out of a low black sky and flinging itself silver against the glass. You could even see it in the dark. The cloud was ragged in places, and a high moon somewhere behind it threw a thin, shifting, colorless light down over everything, enough to see by. The land dropped away below the window in great steep streaming folds, black and slick, and running with water. Higher up, where the slopes climbed and disappeared into cloud, there was snow, long pale ridges of it, going up and up, until the mist simply swallowed them whole. And strung across the near slope, on lines slung between two dark poles, were flags, rows of them, hundreds, small squares of cloth soaked heavily, snapping and streaming flat in the wind, their colors beaten dim by the dark and the wet, but still unmistakably there, faded red and blue and yellows and whites, running away down the mountainside in the pouring rain. Prayer flags, the kind of flags you see in Tibet, on a mountain high up above the town. It was not the town. It was not within 1,000 miles of the town. It was somewhere impossibly high and impossibly far and impossibly, achingly beautiful. And you were not afraid. That was perhaps the strangest part. You stood at the glass in the warm dark of room 4 and looked out at a mountain that had no business being there. and you felt no fear at all, only a great slow wave of wonder, and, threaded all the way through it, something quieter and stranger and completely certain, the feeling that this was right, that this was exactly where you were meant to be tonight, that the cancelled train and the empty map and the one baffling little review, not sure what just happened 5 stars, had all been quietly, patiently, steering you here the entire time, to this window, to this mountain, all along. For a long while, you just stood there and looked at it. You'd have been within your right to stand there till morning. But the longer you looked, the more your eye kept getting pulled back to one particular thing. Because down the slope, a little below the window, where the mountainside dipped and folded into a sheltered hollow, there was a light, a small one, a single warm square of window, gold against all that streaming black, low down among the rocks, and slowly, as your eyes adjusted, the shape around it resolved. A little building, a hut perhaps, hunkered down low against the mountain, the way things learn to sit when the weather means it, with a roof running silver, and a thin ribbon of wood smoke tearing off sideways into the wind. Someone's lamp was lit down there. Someone's fire was going. One small stubborn point of warmth, holding its own in the middle of all that enormous wild dark. And you knew, the way you'd known everything since you drew back that curtain, quietly and completely, and without needing a single word of explanation, that this was lit for you. That the lamp was on, and the fire was burning, and something warm was waiting down there. And that the only thing left for you to do was to go down and find it. So you turned from the window and you went to get dressed. Your clothes were where you dropped them, dry now, warm from the room. You put on everything you had, all of it, near enough, because you had eyes, and you could see what was happening down there. And by the door, hanging on a peg you were fairly certain had been bare when you arrived, there was a coat, a good one, heavy, waxed, built for exactly this kind of night, hanging there with the settled air of a coat that had always hung there and always would. And leaning in the corner beside it, an umbrella. You didn't question it. You were past questioning things. You'd questioned the map and the review, and you stopped somewhere around the mountain, because there's a point past which questioning simply stops being useful, and you sailed cleanly through it. Of course there was a coat. There was a coat because you were going to need a coat. You put it on, and it fit like it had been cut for you. You took the umbrella. You put the hand on the door of room 4, the same door, the ordinary door, the one you come in through hours ago, off a narrow second-floor corridor, and you opened it, and there was no corridor. There was a mountain. The door of your room gave straight out onto it, onto a worn stone step, and a path unspooling away downhill, into the dark, and the rain, and the wind, and the whole vast breathing shoulder of the world. The warm indoor hush of Heron House at your back, and the wild open night in front of you, and nothing but a door frame standing between the two. You step through it, out onto the steps. You pulled the door gently shut behind you, and you put the umbrella up against the rain. The rain came down onto it at once, hard and steady, drumming just over your head and running off the edges in long unbroken silver threads. The wind shouldered into you, not unkindly, more like a big dog saying hello than anything that meant you harm, and then went on past, down the mountain, about its own enormous business. And you set off down the path toward the light. It was a good path, old and worn, uncertain under your feet. Stone steps in some places, packed earth in others, easing its way down the slope in long, unhurried curves. The work of people who'd walked this way for a very long time, and were in no rush about any of it. You matched it. You didn't hurry either. There was no hurry to be had. The rain fell, and the umbrella turned it, and the good coat kept the cold off, and you walked down through the middle of a wild mountain, feeling all the unlikely things, utterly, completely safe, warm, held, looked after. One small dry figure under one small umbrella, making its way down an enormous streaming mountain, entirely at peace with the arrangement. The prayer flags ran along beside the path here and there, slung low between their poles. And close up, you could finally see them properly. Squares of cloth, worn soft and thin with the years of weather, printed with a faded script you couldn't read, and didn't need to. Sodden and heavy, and still somehow lifting, snapping, streaming out flat in the wind. Water ran from their trailing corners in steady beads. They had been here a long time, and there was something about them you found unexpectedly steadying. All these small worn scraps of colour, strung up high in a wild, lonely place, patiently saying their soft old words over and over into the wind, sending them out down the mountain to anyone at all, whether a single soul ever passed to hear them or not, sending one to you maybe, tonight, on your way down. The path went down and down gently, and the light grew closer and warmer and steadier, and the smell of wood smoke found you in the wind, and beneath the great roar of rain on the whole wide open mountain, you began to pick out a smaller, nearer, cozier sound. The sound of rain on one particular little roof just ahead, and under that, closer still, faint and companionable, and getting clearer with every step. The snap and crackle of a fire. And then you were there. Inside it was warm. That was the whole world for a moment, just warmth, hitting you the instant you stepped through the door, wrapping right around you after the cold and the wet and the wind. You stood there, dripping on the threshold, and let it soak into you. And something in your shoulders that had been braced against the weather quietly let go. It was one small room, and every inch of it had been built precisely for this. A low ceiling of dark old timber, thick stone walls, keeping the weather firmly on the far side of them, where it belonged. A floor of worn wood, scattered with rugs so thick and matted and old, they'd gone as soft as moss underfoot. And there, against the wall, on the far side, an open hearth, not a closed-up stove, but a proper fire, real flames working away over a bed of glowing embers. Real flames working away over a bed of glowing embers, throwing its warmth and its restless amber light right across the room. You could hear it over the drum of the rain on the roof, under everything. The fire talked, the snap and pop of the wood, the soft collapse of a log settling into the embers, the steady companionable crackle of a thing burning slow and well. It's one of the oldest sounds that there is, older than houses, older than language probably, a sound that goes straight past the thinking part of you and speaks directly to something much further down, something that has always known that where there is a fire like that, there is warmth and safety, and no need to be anywhere else tonight. A lantern hung from a low beam, turned down soft, adding its own steady gold to the firelight. A bench ran along one wall, heaped with cushions and folded blankets. A small window sat in the stones, its shutters open, the rain streaming down the black glass beyond it. And near the fire, low to the ground, there was a small table, set for one. Set, you understood, for you. Because there on the table, waiting, was tea, a pot of it, squat, dark, clay-fired, sitting on a little iron stand with a candle burning. A single cup beside it, no handle, just a small round bowl of a thing, the kind you're meant to hold cupped in both hands. A covered dish, a folded cloth, Everything a cold and tired person coming down off a mountain might want. Laid out neat and ready, and just so, as if someone had heard your feet on the path, set it all out for you, and then slipped quietly away before you reached the door, so as not to make a fuss about it, so as not to trouble you with themselves, because there was no one there. The hut was empty and still, and completely yours. But it had been readied for you down to the last small detail. Warmed, lit, laid. The fire built up. The tea kept hot, with a care you could feel in this whole room. Somebody, somewhere, had wanted you looked after tonight. You would never know who. And the strange thing, the lovely thing, was that you found you didn't need to. It was enough. It was more than enough that they had. You shrugged off the wet coat and hung it by the door, where it began gently to steam in the warmth. You crossed to the fire, and you lowered yourself onto the cushions beside the little table, close enough to the flames to feel them on the side of your face. And you let out a long, slow breath you hadn't realized you'd been holding on to for hours. The tea was butter tea. You knew it somehow, though you'd never had it, never even seen it before. Thick and warm, and faintly salted. The color of milky coffee. A thin curl of steam lifting right off the surface of it. You poured a little into the small round cup. You wrapped both your cold hands around it, and the warmth went straight through your palms and up into your wrists and your arms and somehow the whole of you, before you'd even taken a sip. Then you drank. It was strange and rich. Not quite like anything you'd met before. Savory where you'd braced for sweet. Warming in a deep, slow, unhurried way that seemed to travel all the way down and settle somewhere at your center. It wasn't a drink made to be clever or fashionable, or to taste of much beyond exactly what it was. It was a drink made to keep a body alive, and warm, and going, high up in the thin, cold air, at the top of the world. And it had been doing that quiet job for longer than anyone could say. And right now, cold and tired, and a very long way from anywhere, it was the single most welcome thing you had ever tasted. You felt it reach all the way down. You felt your shoulders come the rest of the way loose. You felt something that had been holding itself tight in you all evening, all day, maybe a good while longer than that. Simply and finally, let go. You wrapped your hands back around your warm cup. The fire cracked and settled beside you. The rain came down on the roof just overhead, and you shifted where you sat to look out at the night. You finished your tea slowly, watching the fire work through its logs. And when the pot was empty and the warmth of it had spread all the way through you, some quiet instinct told you it was time. Not to leave exactly, but to head back up the mountain, to the warm room with your key in the door, and the bed, and the sleep. You rose from the cushions. You took the coat from its peg, dry now and warm right through. And at the door you paused and looked back once at the little hut that had been made so gently ready for you. The low fire still crackling, the lantern glowing, the single empty cup, and felt the quiet, wordless gratitude toward whoever had lit it and laid it out and slipped away, and never once let you see their face. Then you stepped out, put up the umbrella, and started back up the path. And it was going up in no hurry, with the tea warm inside you, that the mountain finally showed you all of itself. You hadn't really looked on the way down. You'd been going toward the light, watching your feet on the wet stone. But now, climbing slow, with nowhere to be and nothing to reach, you lifted your eyes and looked properly, and the whole vast world sweep of it opened out around you. The storm had the mountains completely. Rain came down in great grey veils across the slopes, drifting and sweeping as the wind carried it. Far off, a great peak would show itself for a moment, dark and streaming, huge against the ragged sky, and then the rain would draw slowly across it like a curtain, and it would dim and vanish into grey, and minutes later, just as slowly, come back. The weather moving over the mountains, patient and unbothered. The weather moving over the mountains, patient and unbothered. The way it had for 10,000 years, and would long after tonight, was a thing nobody remembered. You stopped a while just to watch it. You could afford to. And there is a particular kind of peace you found in watching enormous wild weather form inside your own small pocket of warm. You climbed on, and as you climbed, you began to feel the tea, that deep, thick, buttery warmth of it, still spreading through you by slow degrees, still doing its old patient work, weighting your arms, your legs, drawing a lovely heaviness down over you, step by gentle step, a drink made to warm a cold body through and slow it. And it was settling you now, out here on the dark path, whether you willed it or not. The prayer flags flickered past in the lantern light, saying their soft words over and over into the dark. The rain drummed steadily on the umbrella overhead, the day began at last, at long last, to let go of you. The old friend, the late talking, the laughing, the cancelled train, the map, the mountain, all of it loosening now, setting itself gently down. You didn't have to carry any of it a step further. You could set it down here on the mountain, in the rain, and simply climb, warm and heavy and half asleep already toward the light. And there, at the top of the path, the light was waiting. Heron House stood just as you left it, warm and lit. You lowered the umbrella, you shook it, and you stepped in out of the weather one last time. And there he was, the man from the desk. Same chair, same low lamp, reading glasses still shoved up on his forehead. What looked like the very same crossword open in front of him. Sitting in a quiet lobby at the top of an impossible mountain at some unknowledgeable hour of the night, as though it were the most ordinary place in the world to be. He looked up as you came in. You opened your mouth, though you couldn't have said what you meant to ask. He smiled small. He smiled unhurried, and not remotely inclined to explain a thing. "Sleep well," he said, and looked back down at his crossword. You climbed down the narrow stairs to the second floor, one hand trailing the cool wall. The tea and the warmth, and the long good day pulling heavier at you with every step. Room 4 was just as you left it, the lamp low and amber, the bed heaped with its soft creams and greys, and still quietly making its case. But this time you didn't draw the curtains. You decided to leave them wide open. And you got into the bed. It was even better than you remembered. And pulled the blankets up and settled where you could still see it. The mountain, the grey weather moving over the peaks, the snow glowing faint and far, the rain coming down and down over the whole vast breathing shoulder of the world. You watched a distant peak appear and soften and vanish into the rain. You waited for it to come back, and somewhere in the waiting, the team warm inside of you, the rain soft on the glass, the mountain keeping its ancient patient watch, the way it had kept watch over everything. Your breathing slowed, not because you told it to, just because the rain was falling in that same slow, unhurried rhythm, on and on. And your body, without being asked, decided to fall in with it, in and out, the rain. And somewhere in the rhythm of it all, without quite catching the moment it happened, you went. Good night. Sleep well, my friend. I'll see you on the next one.